Hey everyone, Walter Crosby with Helix Sales Development and another episode of Sales and Cigars. We got a different kind of episode today. My guest is Mat Boyle, and Matt's got a company called Online to Offline, and it's a great service that he's providing to companies that are helping them systematize and build lead gen and do things the right way so that they're long lasting. But the way he's doing it is what's really interesting, and his impact on the community around the globe. He had a personal experience where he went to Thailand and was involved with rescuing and saving some women and some girls that were being trafficked, and it impacted him personally, and he took some time to figure out, and he's able to help those women and girls earn a living doing the work that he's doing with his company. So it's an amazing story, and we don't even get into his strongman competition that he's training for. So I mean, he lives on this part of Australia where he's sort of next to a rainforest and a outback with desert, and he's got all these animals and iguanas and spiders all over the place and bats. He's just an interesting guy. It's a great story. So go grab a cocktail, go grab a cigar, strap in for another great episode of Sales and Cigars. Thank you. So Matt, appreciate you taking some time out of your schedule, early morning, Saturday, right?
Saturday morning, that's it.
You?
Starting off great.
Yeah. So I appreciate you jumping on early on a Saturday morning. I can see the sunrise behind you. Welcome to Sales and
Yeah,
Cigars.
thanks for having us. It's a pleasure.
So you've got you got an interesting business and an interesting approach, a little twist on it, if you will. So let's start with the business and your approach to sales, how you think about it, and what that looks like. So we kind of just walk through that a little bit, and we'll just have a little conversation, if you
Yeah,
will,
yeah, certainly.
around.
So there's a few layers to the story there, but fundamentally, I was working as a sales trainer, and I'd be sitting in dealerships and businesses and looking at sales teams and spending whole days training them on prospecting techniques and customer service calls and follow-up calls and lead nurture calls and all of these kind of what I would consider basics and fundamentals that go into sales. Like, because if you can't generate your own leads, you shouldn't be in sales. And so we're spending time doing that, and just it was like beating my head against the brick wall. Talking to salespeople that they just didn't want to do it. So one day I kind of just went, well, if I can just figure out how to automate these processes and outsource these processes and do them in such a way that the quality of the messaging is as good as the best salesperson in that business. Businesses then, instead of paying me to train them, would actually pay for me to build and manage a system. So that's basically what we did. So we've built all of these prospecting processes and follow-up processes and lead nurture processes that we can automate or outsource and do them in such a way that the quality of communication is as good as the best person, the best prospect or the best follow-up in any business. So we're not talking about using an Indian or a Filipino telemarketer. We're using systems that are far more sophisticated to be able to deliver those results at a higher standard than if you're doing them by yourself.
Got it. So how do you go about getting the message right for the customer? Is there you have a process that you pull that info out of the prospect? Do they understand it typically? Do you have to help them figure out the
Well,
messaging?
when we're building a campaign, we spend a lot of time reverse engineering the sales process. So we look back at that journey and go, well, at that, the happy point in the sale when someone's signing a contract and handing over a check, what are all the things they need to be certain of? And then,
Yeah.
you look at that and go, well, they need to be certain that it's going to be a return. They need to be certain that the product or service suits their needs. And all of those kind of things. So then we work backwards to earlier phases in the sale to go, well, before someone's going to take an appointment, what do they need to be certain of? And then we keep going further back to the beginning to go, right, someone that is a total stranger, has never heard of us, the business, the product or service is sitting there in their, sitting in their bubble, completely self-absorbed in their day. What do we need to say to stop, get their attention, and to get them to go, yes, I want to read more. Yes, I want to listen more. And then we start to build the messaging around those kind of decisions. Then we look at the different media and go, well, how can we do that in a leveraged fashion? And then on the other side of that, how can we go make sure that the people we're sending that message to are of the right quality? So we kind of have those sort of two pillars of the pendulum sitting there. One of it is really looking at how do we identify that prospect avatar and make sure we're finding them, and there's processes we can go about using to identify that and really profile. And then there's what's the right media to use them, and there's different technologies we use of voicemail drops, SMS drops, LinkedIn direct messages, cold emails, video messages, postcards, lump emails, strategic gifts. There's a heap of different kind of tools we can use to stop and get their attention, and to get them to start the process. And then it's just a matter of qualifying them and taking them from that initial interest into a qualified appointment through from there. So, everything is kind of fits in within a framework, but we spend the time in the beginning to be able to really drill down into the business, the prospect, the sales process, and make sure that those processes are really tight and really effective and can be measured and managed.
So are you typically working with a VP of sales or the sales leader as opposed to the CEO of the company or a marketing person or all three?
Look, usually all three, depending on where the company is in its growth cycle. So we work with a lot of startups and scale-ups. So they, at that stage, they're building their sales team, they're building their sales leadership. So we can come in and provide that sort of sales leadership on a fractional basis in the short term, and help them kind of gear these processes up, get them working, get them delivering a return, put the management systems in place so they know how to measure and manage. And then we start bringing in that sort of that senior level of management around the processes, so we can kind of take a backward step and let them continue to thrive.
So are you doing this geographically? Are there any limitations? You stay in English-speaking countries?
Yeah, look, really English-speaking countries. So we have a few clients in Australia, a lot of clients in the United States and Canada and the UK, and we've even got a few sort of starting to emerge out of Mexico and other sort of parts around the world. So there's no real limitations to where we can work. It's really just the sort of finding the culture fit in businesses that understand sales are actually prepared to do the hard work to make sales work. There's that sort of conundrum at the moment of a lot of businesses that confuse sales with order taking and just expect people to buy, and sit in that little bit of a delusion that it's all easy and that kind of stuff, which we don't work too well with. But those that understand that sales is a contact sport and requires some effort and participation, we can work really well with.
Well, it's interesting that because we encounter that where there's different roles in sales, and we'll support a company trying to hire a sales professional, right? So one of the first questions we ask them is, so what role are we trying to fill here? And I would say probably 6 to 7 times out of 10, they look at us as like it's sales role. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, so business development hunter person that you're just going to go out and kill things and bring them back, and somebody's going to make sure that the orders get filled? Or are we talking about account management? You get people warming stuff up, BDRs, SDRs, and they like, well, yeah, we want them to do all that. And like, okay, so that's a different person than all of the other things. And what I found is with startups, and I'm curious your take on this, startups have a tendency to get that first hire wrong because they want somebody to be the sales leader and be able to build a team, but they also need that person to go out and just hunt, fill the role, fill the pipeline, and that's not always the same person. That person might grow into being a sales leader, but they go hire that sales leader who doesn't have the chops to do that. And I'm just curious if you run into that.
All the time. It's that, most people's sales is an afterthought. They go that, they've built this great product, this great widget, this great service, and then they go, we've built this entire company, but we haven't got a customer. Oh, we need a salesperson.
Right.
And I see it over and over and over again where they rely on people, not system. And, the thing that I do when we start working with, businesses and organizations is going, before we start looking at the people, let's look at the process. Let's look at building this bus that is going to deliver you the returns you need. Let's look at all the steps that are needed. Then let's look at how we're going to measure it, how we're going to manage it. And then we can start looking at, right, what are the people we need to bring in to sit on, at the right seats at the bus, and where do we start? And most people want to bring in a sales leader and go, here, you go solve it. But as you know, and you kind of alluded to, a good hunter isn't a good farmer, and a good farmer isn't a good hunter. And depending on where the business is at and what stage they're at, you might need a good farmer or you might need a good hunter. If you're in a startup phase and funds are limited, you haven't got the investment, you need someone that can go out, hunt, kill, conquer, bring in that cash. And you
build the cash.
You want to be able to support them with systems and support them with everything that enables them to spend more time engaged in that sales process, hunting, killing, conquering. You don't want them going, spending half of their week in the office doing meetings and, training people and all that kind of stuff, because that's not their domain. But if you already got revenues in and you want to, lock it in, and you've had client churn or something like that, that's where you need someone that's going in more of that account management farmer type of strategy. So, knowing the difference starts with having the right system and understanding what that bus looks like for you and where the different seats are on it.
Yeah, in my experience, I have personal experience earlier on in my career with a startup, and my wife tells a story. I left a perfectly great job, making lots of money, to go work for a startup and, completely flip that around on the hope that something would happen. Yep. And that they wanted somebody to do all of those things. They had very few customers. And to me, the timing with the startup, really understanding where they are in their funding, where they are with their ability to produce capacity. Because my personal experience was we got product number 1 here, Gen 1 products, and then we're going to build Gen 2. So we need to get rid of Gen 1, and when we do that, we'll be ready for Gen 2. And I sold the remaining Gen 1s in a couple of months, and I kept getting humana, right? Like Gen 2 will be available next month, and then that next month, and that next month, yep. Right? They never were able to produce. So, and a lot of that had to do with funding, and a lot of it had to do with vision and timing, and politics. But it's interesting that those founders, unless somebody has a sales marketing background or there's an advisor that really gets it, they seem to make the same damn mistakes on a consistent basis. Oh. It's like somebody, you gotta write a book and say, stop doing this and do that.
It's the delusion. And, I remember way back, when I was in my early 20s and I bought my first business, my dad said to me, look, I don't care what you do, just go and talk to this guy, and we're looking at buying a restaurant. So completely different. And, I went, okay. And we went and spoke to this family friend who at the time owned 2 restaurant chains and about 6 other standalone restaurants. So the guy knew his stuff. He, had built,
had enough experience.
20 years ago, had built a multi-million-dollar business in the hospitality fields. And I went there and I showed him this restaurant we were looking at buying, and the guy said to me, "Don't do it. You're going to go broke. Rent's too high. Yada yada yada," and gave me all the reasons why it was destined to fail. And I remember the young, arrogant me looking at him, going, "You don't know what you're talking about. This, and I'd bought into this delusion that I was going to make it successful." Anyway, so we went ahead and bought it, and I ignored his advice. And guess what? 18 months later, I was bankrupt. I'd lost everything, and everything that he said would happen happened exactly as it would. So we all make those mistakes. We all fall into that delusion of overestimating our capabilities and underestimating our weaknesses, looking at the product that we've got and being attached to it emotionally, and the development we've put into it, and all the systems and the time and blood, sweat, and equity, and just think it's going to be successful. But unless you know how to market it and sell it and get someone to put their hands in their pocket and pay money for it and pay more than what it's costing you, you've got nothing. Sure. And I've had clients that have come on board that we've had to fire them as clients because they're stuck in that delusion of, we don't want to actually sell it, we want people to buy it. We want to do 90% of our sales on webinars, but our webinar sucks. We don't have our messaging right. We don't have our process right. We don't have anything right, but we want to do $1 million a month worth of revenue from webinars. And if you can't deliver that for us, you don't know what you're talking about. And it's like going, goodbye.
Sales and the restaurant business, hospitality, they're hard. It takes a lot of work. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to fail. Congratulations, you've tried and you've got experience. It's like Oscar Wilde, I think, was the one who said, experience is the name I give to my mistakes.
Yeah, totally.
And I used to add a corollary to that where it's like, and I'm a really experienced guy because I've made enough of them. But you being young and arrogant, thinking that's something you outgrow really fast, and you start to pay attention to people.
Nothing like a punch in the face. Mm-hmm. To get that wake up, and I'm glad I did that in my early 20s, because now I'm sitting there and I had that experience. I paid the price, recovered, rebuilt, put it back in, and now it's going right. I don't make that mistake again. I don't underestimate how much it's going to take, what it's going to take, and all that kind of stuff. And we've been in the situations where, I've had to go and sell to put food on the table. And it's like, if you're not, and when we were starting the business 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I got pneumonia and they wanted to put me in hospital, and we're like, I'm 3 weeks behind the rent. Put me in hospital. By the time, you release me, my family's going to be out on the street. Right. So no, sod that. Went back home, hit the phones that afternoon, made the sales that I needed to get ahead in the rent, and then moved on with life. So, that's, you don't have, not everyone has to go through those kind of extremes, but, when you're in business and when you're looking at sales, that's how seriously you've got to treat it as life or death to get out there. And then you've got to understand what are the steps you need to take to make it, in order to make it happen, and then just repeat that more often. Like you mentioned before, before the recording there, when you're starting out, 400 calls a day, that's the stuff. If, I know if I lost everything tomorrow, what I'll be doing on Monday is I'll be picking up the phone and making 400 phone calls and starting again, and I'll be back where I am now in 12 months time.
Yeah. And I don't think it's arrogant to say this, but we could drop us in an English-speaking country, and we could earn a living ethically selling something, because we have the tenacity, we have the skill set, we have the desire to go out and do it. And it's I get challenged a lot by salespeople when we're coaching and training them, like, the prospecting call that they're doing, they're not executing, the nuance is off, their message is off, and they're like, and every once in a while some smart ass will say, well, then why don't you do it? All right, dial the phone, right? Dial one of your people that you haven't reached, and they'll do 5 or 6 dials, and somebody picks up, and I get a meeting.
Yep.
Or I disqualify them, right? and they're like, how did you do that? And it's like, I don't care about the outcome. I'm trying to get someplace to see if there's something here, and I'm paying attention and listening, right? So product knowledge and all that other BS. It's about, having a certain set of skills to go out and get people's
Well,
attention.
these
So
days,
let's
people have more product knowledge than most salespeople. It's all on the internet. It's all on YouTube. You can go find out. So
they don't need us. They don't need us
they
for
don't
that.
need us.
It's
It
those days
is
are gone.
understanding how to ask the right questions in the right sequence to get the information out of the prospect of why they're looking for this, what problems they're looking at solving, what challenges they're over going to come, how they're going to be using it. And when you understand the right sort of syntax and the right questions, the prospects do the buying. The prospects will give you everything that they need, and then it's just a matter of following the process. But it's that, as you said, you've got to detach yourself from that emotion. You've got to just not care. You've got to not judge. You've just got to be able to take every call on its merits. And I used to do the same thing.
And have fun.
Yeah, I used to do the same thing when I was training salespeople. And, I came in at a time where I was one of the first guys to see the changes the internet was making back in 2006, 2007. And as I'm training salespeople through there, I would go, look, everyone go and bring me 3 leads that you think are dead that have inquired over the internet in the last 3 days. They have to be 3 days because we need a fighting chance of being able to turn them. But I want you to go, there's zero chance of doing a deal. And they would go doing that because, all salespeople think they know their stuff, and they hate sales trainers because they think the sales trainers don't know what they're talking about and haven't got the year's worth of experience. I'd just sit there and pick up the phone, and every time within 5 calls, I'd have a qualified appointment or I'd have a credit card and a car sold. And then, that'd all be jaws dropped and that because they're all waiting for you to fail. And then, their jaws dropped and they go, how'd you do it? And I said, well, give me 6 hours of your time and I'll show you exactly how to do it. But the thing is, 90%,
hell of a demo.
90% of them would walk out of that training and within 2 weeks be back to their old habits.
Yeah, change is tough. Change is hard, and trying to get different results without affecting some different. And you can show them where they are, why they're wrong, and they just don't want to see it. And we have plenty of data that 6% of salespeople around the globe are what we would call elite and can be successful anywhere. And then you've got another like 13-14% that are good, and there's another chunk of 20 that's average, and the rest of them you just keep them the hell away from your sales team. But unfortunately, the bar to get into sales is so low, and people are afraid to let people go that don't perform. I mean, we could talk for hours about culture problems and accepting mediocrity and what that does to the whole sales organization, and ultimately what it does.
And that's where the shift I've made over the last few years, as we've been kind of moving into our business development centers and doing that, is going system first, people second. And if you have the right system and we can automate the outreach and we can outsource that in a way that doesn't affect the quality, you can actually achieve a lot more with a lot less. And instead of spending the time on training and the money for them to go out and all that stuff, you actually just build the system and go, here, follow this script, and you can manage the process, and through managing the process, deliver a better outcome than what training's going to achieve from there.
Yeah,
So
that's exactly why most training doesn't work. And we always start with understanding what you have on your team, understanding what your systems are doing and what they're not doing, and understanding the various roles within the organization. And then you come back and you work on the system, right? The processes, the methodology. That's the first thing. And then you work on the managers to get them to understand how this is going to work so that they can help enforce it. And accountability, they usually can't spell accountability, so you got to help them with that. and then, right, you have to orient it's not even training as much as it is orienting the reps to be able to follow the stage and the milestones along the
Yep.
way. It's I mean, we're singing from the same hymnal
Oh,
here.
totally.
I love it.
It's you know
So let's kind of pivot to the other aspect of your business and what the impact is the community. Can you share a little bit about that, because it's a
yeah.
amazing
Well,
thing
part
you're
of
doing.
the shift and part of the catalyst for the shift of sales trainer into sales systems was I went and spent 3 weeks over in Thailand, and it was with this Aussie guy that's involved in the Thai immigration police, and we were involved in rescuing women out of brothels and kids out of brothels, and looking at this depravity which is sexual slavery and exploitation and human trafficking. And I just got back and it just touched me, and opened my heart and just touched me in a way that nothing else ever has. And I went, I've got to make a difference, And when I got back, I knew very quickly that I wasn't the guy to go in and do the rescuing. I'm not cut out for that. I can't detach, from the emotion of that.
Right.
And I've got my own family here that, I've got to protect first, and I didn't want the damage that come along with that, but I wanted to
Sure.
support them and enable them and that. So I was looking at how can I make the impact, and fast forward over a couple of sort of iterations, it came down to this thing of this decision of, well, if I can automate and outsource the sales process, I can build an outsourcing center wherever I want in the globe. And if I can do it in the way that the quality is exactly where the best performer in any organization is, I can go build these centers anywhere in the world, and I can go build them in the communities where exploitation is happening, and that, because the number one reason why everyone gets caught up in this exploitation, this slavery and trafficking, is because of money. So
Yep.
we started to build our centers in these developing countries and start to use them as a way of creating jobs in these communities, putting money into these communities, so they have options, they have ways of supporting themselves and their family without going into the traffickers and getting caught up in the scams that led them through there. So that's for me now my real mission. That's what I do. How I fund that and how I do it is through teaching people how to sell, building sales systems, and then helping them create jobs in these communities through our centres. But for me, it's all about creating jobs, and it's all about impacting lives and impacting communities.
And I mean, that's not just in the Pacific Rim. I mean, we have that in our country,
Oh,
here in the States,
totally. It's
um,
it's it's everywhere.
in communities where you wouldn't anticipate it being there. Um, Girls at risk are being yanked off the street and to be taken into that life, and it's the impact. It's terrible. I mean, you understand it better than most
Yeah, look,
people do.
it's just this depravity, and it all comes down to they needed money, and so they borrowed money off someone they shouldn't have. They took a job they shouldn't have. They got scammed into a job that didn't actually exist, and so it's
Yep.
going, well, if I can solve this problem, and lost sales cost companies over $1 trillion a year, and lost sales because they're not handling the sales process properly. So it's going, on one hand you've got $1 trillion problem, and on the other hand you've got thousands of women and girls that have been trafficked and all that kind of stuff because of money. If I can figure out how to bridge the two and solve the $1 trillion problem, surely I can make an impact over here. And
Sure.
it's the framework we've built is a global framework. We can drop this in any country in the world. Now, like at the moment, we've got our first center. We're opening our second one next year, and then once we've duplicated it, it's been able to duplicate it, and that's kind of where the next few years for me, I want to be able to spend more time on on opening centers and less time on building the systems. But because our business has been self-funded, we haven't taken any investments, donations, grants, or anything like that. We're doing it quite strategically and sort of slowing down to speed up to make sure we've got
Sure.
the foundations in place.
Build the foundation so you can you can scale it faster later, right?
Exactly
that's the
right.
way to do
And it's that slow down to speed up mentality. So, me as the salesman, the hunter, the killer, the conqueror that just wants to go and take over the world, it gets a bit frustrating, but that's why I've got a support team around me and people that understand the areas, and have my back with the areas that I'm weakest at, of going, no, you can't do that now because ... go solve this problem first. So,
it. Yep.
that's the
Yep. I love it.
that's the journey we're on, which is, yeah, it's fun.
And it's impactful, and you're changing lives and changing the communities, and it's something that is a problem that you're not going to make go away, but you're going to impact lives and take people out of that depravity, as you say. And there's no way to really describe what that real impact is emotionally on people, because you're giving them hope, you're giving them a chance to get out. So I love it.
It's just giving them options and just spending time on educating them, spending time on systems, spending time on supporting them. From that, and the way they grow and they develop is just amazing. And we do that. The other side of it is going back to the businesses of going, well, we're going into businesses and helping them scale, and the more success we can help them get, the more profits they make, and then the more profits they make, and the higher their revenues are, the bigger their team grows. So by helping them grow, we're creating more jobs, and by creating more jobs, we're having more impact. And, the byproduct out of all of that is we end up making more profit, which is just this beautiful relationship that I never planned when we first started it, of going, well, it's this thing where, my personal interests and my personal kind of success and wealth and all that kind of stuff is tied to the success of my clients, which is also then tied to the impact that we're having in the communities, and one feeds off the other and feeds off the other. And so, that's just this thing that the more impact I have, the more profit I make, and the more profit I make, the more clients I help, and the more clients I help, the more impact I have. It's this beautiful spiral that just keeps growing. It's awesome.
Yeah, it only gets better. It's the circling, and you're going up, and the circle keeps getting bigger. So, congratulations. Hat tip. So let's wrap up with what I always end with. Ask a guest if there's a relationship with cigars, if you got a story, if you got something that's meaningful around cigars. I'm just kind of curious.
Well, I'm not a cigar fan personally, but a good cigar usually goes with a good whiskey, and I love a good whiskey so much so I have a son named Jamison. So, that's the segue through from there. That, by the time you get to the sixth child, you're running out of names to come up with. So we're looking at a good bottle of whiskey, and I just said to the wife, what about Jamison? And before she realised it was connected to the whiskey that I was drinking, she said, I love it, and there we go. So we've got a nice Jamison collection. All the merchandise, and he's 9 and very, very happily tells everyone what he's named after.
Nice. So you'd have a Bushmills, somebody named Bushmills, a Redbreast, if you're sticking with the Irish whiskeys, right?
If we kept going, we would probably head down that path and all that kind of stuff. But we stopped at 6, so that was that. No need to go deeper into the barrel into different names.
Well, I love it. I appreciate you. I appreciate you taking the time today to have this chat. I mean, you're doing some great work helping companies grow and solving problems and helping a terrible thing that's going on across the planet. What's the best way for people to reach out to you, to get further information, to engage with you? What, LinkedIn, website?
Yeah, look, you can find me on LinkedIn, which is Matthew, spelt with 1 T, Boyle. The other thing I've got is we've put together a bit of a free tool called the Sales Growth Scorecard, which you can go check out. That will ask you a few simple questions about your business, your product, your current sales process, and we'll be able to give you some recommendations of how can you get more leverage, how can you be able to scale up your sort of sales and your prospecting and your follow-up activities while reducing some of those sort of sales costs by sort of leveraging the systems that we've spoken about here from there. So that's a great resource that you can go that you can go and check out.
You can pull that from LinkedIn or your website?
Both. So the sales growth scorecard.
So we'll have that in the show notes so people can track that down. Again, thank you much. Good luck with all of the endeavors. Thank you.
Mate, pleasure. It's been awesome.
Thank you for listening to Sales and Cigars with Walter Crosby of Helix Sales Development. For more on sales and cigars, remember to like, share, and subscribe. Sales and Cigars, produced by thepodcastproshop.com.